Let me tell you something scary. The people you trust the most can sometimes become the biggest threat you've ever faced. And you might not even realize it until it's almost too late. I'm talking about my own daughter, Riley. I was on a cruise, one of those luxurious 7-day Caribbean trips. It was meant to be a relaxing getaway, a way to reconnect with Riley after a few years of, distance. You know how it is. Kids grow up, they get busy, they move away, and suddenly the calls become less frequent and the shared moments are non-existent. I had splurged on this trip, hoping the ocean air and endless buffets would somehow melt away all the unspoken tension between us. The setting itself was picture perfect. Azure water stretching out to the horizon, warm sun beating down, and the gentle rhythmic thrum of the ship's engines. Every night before I went to bed, Riley would bring me a cup of her special herbal tea. She'd started getting into holistic wellness lately, always brewing these elaborate concoctions from dried flowers and roots she ordered online. She knew I had trouble sleeping sometimes, and she insisted this particular blend was the perfect natural sedative. "Mom, drink this. It'll help you switch off," she'd say, handing me the warm mug. She'd stand there watching with that soft, slightly patronizing smile she developed recently, the one that made her look so mature, so responsible. I never questioned it. Why would I? This was my child. My sweet, brilliant, sometimes moody but fundamentally good daughter. I'd raised her. I trusted her implicitly. I would take a sip, the tea tasting earthy and a little bitter, but I'd chug it down anyway, grateful for the gesture. And it always worked. Within 20 minutes, I'd be sleeping soundly, maybe a little too soundly, until the morning light woke me. The 6th day of the cruise was when everything shattered. It was late afternoon. I was on the Lido deck trying to finish a novel when a ship's steward approached me. "Excuse me, Mrs. Bennett? Olivia? The ship's doctor, Dr. Elena Vargas, would like to see you in the medical bay. She said it's urgent and private." My stomach dropped. I immediately thought of Riley. Was she sick? Did she slip on the wet deck? I rushed down to the medical bay, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dr. Vargas was a sharp-featured woman with intense eyes and a professional but concerned demeanor. She didn't offer a handshake, she just pointed toward a closed-door office. "Thank you for coming, Olivia. Please sit down. What I'm about to show you is highly sensitive and I need you to remain calm," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How could I be calm? She didn't waste any time. She dimmed the lights, spun her computer monitor around, and pressed play. It was grainy surveillance footage, obviously from a camera placed discreetly outside or inside one of the cabins. I recognized the hallway outside my door. The timestamp showed 10:15 p.m. the night before. I watched as the door to my cabin number 712 opened. It was Riley. She was wearing her thick, fluffy robe, and in one hand she held the familiar ceramic mug, my nightly tea. She looked around quickly, then slipped inside. The internal camera must have been triggered by movement because the view switched. Now I was looking at the small table in my cabin. Riley set the mug down. She reached into the pocket of her robe and pulled out a small, dark vial. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched in my throat. She uncapped the vial, and with a precision that was chillingly practiced, she shook a few tiny white granules into the hot liquid. They dissolved instantly. Then she quickly put the vial away, picked up the mug, and left the frame. The external footage showed her stepping out, taking a deep breath, and then knocking lightly on my door. The screen went black. I just stared at the blank monitor, utterly paralyzed. My brain felt like a tangled mess of wires, refusing to process the input. No, that wasn't real. It was a bad camera angle. It was a joke. It was anything but what I just saw. Dr. Vargas leaned in, her voice low and serious. "Olivia, we monitor all unusual activity, especially in private quarters. We noticed this pattern 3 days ago. We analyze all potential toxins brought onto the ship. We intercepted a small residue of that substance this morning. It's an extract from a rare South American nightshade. In small doses, it acts as a very powerful, untraceable sedative. In slightly larger doses, it causes cardiac distress. Over time, in the cumulative amounts we suspect you've been consuming." She let the sentence hang, not needing to finish it. The implication was a gut punch. My daughter was poisoning me. Fully. Systematically. A frantic, desperate denial surged through me. "No, you must be mistaken. That's just a sleep supplement she takes herself. She just made a mistake and put it in my cup." The doctor shook her head, her face etched with profound sympathy. Olivia, Riley did this every night since boarding. I've seen the footage. I understand this is devastating, but you must face the reality. She is actively trying to harm you. The tears finally came, hot and stinging, but I quickly wiped them away. Crying wouldn't help. I needed to think. I needed to understand. Why? Did you talk to her? I whispered. Absolutely not, Dr. Vargas stated firmly. That would tip her off and put you in immediate greater danger. The ship's security team is aware, but we needed to speak to you first. We need your cooperation. The most important thing right now is your safety. Tonight, when she offers you the tea, you have to pretend to drink it. Pretend. To swallow down that horrible realization and act like everything was normal. I can't believe it, I mumbled, the words tasting like ash. She's my child. She's trying to kill me. And for those of you watching, if you've ever had a moment where your trust was completely betrayed, where you looked at someone you loved and realized they were a stranger, drop a comment below and tell me where and when you were watching this. I need to know I'm not the only one who has felt this completely blindsided. I looked at the doctor, my face probably pale and shocked. What if I just confront her now? You cannot, the doctor insisted, her tone leaving no room for argument. If she knows you lose control of the situation. She might panic, she might act rashly. We need a plan. For now, you must maintain the illusion that her plan is working. Do you understand, Olivia? Tonight you pretend to drink that tea. We will be watching. We will be ready. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, a tiny noise in the cavernous silence of the betrayal. I looked out the small porthole window. The Caribbean looked beautiful, innocent. It felt like the entire world was laughing at me. I walked out of that office a completely different person than the one who had walked in. The fun vacation was over. It was now a terrifying, high-stakes psychological game, and my opponent was the person I gave life to. The beautiful, treacherous sea outside was no longer a symbol of relaxation. It was a vast, unforgiving void, and I was adrift. I had to be strong. I had to pretend. The first step was the hardest. Walking back to the cabin and acting like nothing had changed. The doctor's final warning echoed in my ears. Don't drink that tea tonight. That night I would see Riley again. I would look into her eyes and I would know the horrifying truth behind her sweet gesture. The game was on. I walked back to my cabin and every step felt like I was wading through quicksand. The air on the ship, which just hours ago felt light and salty, now felt thick and suffocating. My mind was racing, trying to overlay the image of my sweet, laughing daughter onto the surveillance footage of the cold, calculated poisoner. They were two faces of the same person, and the cognitive dissonance was making me dizzy. Riley was already back in the cabin, lounging on the small sofa, reading a paperback. She looked up when I entered, her expression perfectly serene. "Hey, Mom. Rough day at the pool?" she asked, a small, genuine-looking smile gracing her lips. "Just tired, honey," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. It felt like I was wearing a mask made of paper-thin ice that could shatter at any moment. I made a show of going to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face and trying to steady my reflection. Don't panic, Olivia. Act normal. Cannot know. The backstory here is crucial to understanding the level of hurt and confusion I was feeling. Riley wasn't some estranged problem child. Until a few years ago, we were practically attached at the hip. After her father, David, and I divorced about 5 years ago, it was just the two of us. I worked hard to make sure she never felt the absence of a father figure, pouring everything I had into her education, her interests, her happiness. I delayed my own retirement and sold our nice suburban home to afford her tuition at a prestigious out-of-state university. I took pride in her accomplishments. She was studying pre-med, which she claimed was her passion, a detail that was now twisting the knife in my gut. A pre-med student who knew exactly what she was doing with that nightshade extract. Our friction only really started in the last 2 years. After she left for college, she became secretive, distant. She started making these very expensive lifestyle choices. Designer clothes, spontaneous trips with friends I'd never heard of, and always needing money. Every call felt like a request for more funds, followed by a quick, "Gotta go, Mom, love you," and a click. The last major argument we had about 6 months ago was over her inheritance. David's modest life insurance policy was set aside for her college and future. She wanted a substantial chunk of it now to invest in a friend's groundbreaking tech startup. I flat out refused. That money is for your future, Riley, not for some risky venture you haven't even researched properly. I'd snapped. You never trust me, Mom. You treat me like a child. I'm trying to make a life for myself and you're holding me back. She'd yelled back, the words sharp and cruel. She'd hung up on me that night, and the silence that followed had been heavier than any fight. This cruise, I thought, was my olive branch. A sign that I wanted to bridge that widening gap, to show her that despite the disagreements, my love was unconditional. In the cabin now, the silence stretched, only broken by the distant sound of the ship's band playing some cheesy pop song on the upper deck. I watched Riley from the corner of my eye. She was wearing a tiny silver locket I'd given her on her 16th birthday. It was engraved with my North Star. The irony was suffocating. She looked so innocent, bathed in the soft evening light filtering through the porthole. How could a person capable of such casual malice look so utterly harmless? Around 9:30 p.m. she got up, stretching dramatically. All right, Mom, I'm going to brew your nightly knockout tea. Need anything else? No, honey, that's perfect. Thank you, I replied, trying to sound grateful and tired. The lie tasted metallic on my tongue. I watched her walk toward the small kitchenette area in the cabin. The ship's security had discreetly installed an emergency camera in the vent cover, Dr. Vargas had told me, so they had eyes on the preparation area now. The whole ship felt like a giant floating cage. I busied myself with my novel, pretending to be deeply engrossed, but my heart was pounding a frantic rhythm. I could hear the clinking of porcelain, the rush of boiling water. The sensory details were so normal, so mundane, which only amplified the horror. She was going through the motions of motherly care while planning my demise. When she came back, she placed the mug on my bedside table. The steam curled up, carrying the familiar, slightly bitter, earthy scent. My stomach turned. Here you go, Mom. Sleep well. She leaned in and gave me a light kiss on the cheek. Her touch felt cold and foreign. You too, sweetie, I replied, forcing a smile that felt like a painful grimace. She settled back on the sofa, picking up her book again. This was the routine. She watched me drink it every night. She never left the room until the mug was empty. I realized with a jolt that she wasn't just waiting to be kind. She was waiting for confirmation that her toxin had been ingested. She was ensuring the job was done. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the mug. The warmth of the ceramic was a stark contrast to the icy terror gripping my heart. I knew that one swallow, one accidental slip, and I could lose consciousness, perhaps forever. I needed to buy time. I needed to execute the plan Dr. Vargas and I had briefly discussed. The pretend sip. This smells strong tonight, Riley. Did you use extra lavender? I asked, holding the mug close. She didn't even look up from her book. Maybe a little. Supposed to be extra calming. Don't worry, it's all good stuff. The dismissiveness of her answer, her total lack of concern, solidified the image of the poisoner from the video. The daughter I knew was gone, replaced by this chilling replica. I brought the mug to my lips. My throat clamped shut. I couldn't do it. The smell alone felt toxic. I took a deep, shaky breath, recalling the doctor's words. You must maintain the illusion. I tilted the mug just slightly and took a large, loud, performative gulp. Instead of swallowing, I held the hot, bitter liquid in my mouth, swishing it around briefly. I then quickly lowered the cup, coughed lightly, and cleared my throat. It's very hot tonight, I exclaimed, reaching for the water bottle I always kept on my table. As I pretended to take a long, refreshing drink of water, I discreetly released the mouthful of tea back into the ceramic mug. It was a disgusting, desperate maneuver, but it was the only way. The liquid looked intact, still steamy, just slightly lower in volume. The color and surface tension looked undisturbed. Riley looked over, satisfied. Just get the rest down, Mom, you'll feel better. I took another small, tentative sip, again holding it and discreetly spitting it back. I repeated this twice more, making sure I made noise and looked slightly uncomfortable, like a person drinking something they knew was medicinal and necessary. With the remaining liquid, maybe a third of the cup, I had to improvise. I reached for a tissue to blot my mouth, fumbling slightly. I accidentally knocked the ceramic mug against the bedside table lamp. The remaining tea splashed out onto the thick, dark rug, soaking into the fibers instantly, leaving a minimal, hard-to-spot stain. Oh, damn it, Riley. I'm so sorry, I'm tired and clumsy, I gasped, clutching the now mostly empty mug. Riley finally put her book down and sighed, a slight irritation flickering in her eyes. Mom, seriously? It's fine, just leave it. I'll call a steward tomorrow morning. He checked the mug. It was almost empty, the small residue of liquid absorbed by the rug. My performance had been flawed, but effective. She seemed satisfied that the majority of the dose at least was in me. Good night, Mom, she said, her voice softening, returning to the caring daughter persona. She turned off the main lights and moved toward her own bed, the separation curtain drawn between our halves of the cabin. Good night, my North Star, I whispered, the pet name a hollow, painful echo of the past. I lay there in the dark, my heart still racing, my body slick with nervous sweat. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder than usual, marking the passage of time that separated me from danger. I closed my eyes and concentrated on my breathing. I had survived the first night, but now the real horror began. I had to continue living side by side with my predator, and I had to figure out her motive before she got a second successful shot. Lying in that dark cabin was the most terrifying experience of my life. I couldn't move, couldn't even properly breathe for fear of alerting Riley on the other side of the dividing curtain. I had to maintain the illusion that I was deeply chemically asleep. I even timed my breathing, forcing it into the slow, even pattern of deep slumber. Every rustle of the ship, every creak of the bulkheads, sounded like a thunderclap. The moral conflict was absolutely crushing. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't an enemy. This was the person I gave birth to. Every instinct I had as a mother screamed to reach out, to shake her awake, to demand an explanation, to tell her I forgave her, even for attempted murder. But the cold, rational part of my brain, the part that had seen the footage, knew that confrontation right now was suicide. I was trapped in a room with a potential killer, and the killer was my own child. The secondary challenge, the one that really sharpened the terror, was the sheer intimacy of the setting. This wasn't some anonymous hotel or a public place. This was our shared, small cabin on a moving ship. There was no escape. I stayed absolutely rigid for maybe 2 hours until I heard the distinct, heavy sound of Riley's breathing change. She was definitely asleep. Only then did I dare to move. I slipped out of bed as quietly as a phantom, my bare feet landing silently on the plush carpet. I needed evidence. Not just for the police or the ship's security, but for myself. I needed to know why. I tiptoed to the small luggage rack where her cosmetic bag lay. Dr. Vargas had told me the vial she used was likely stored somewhere easily accessible. I unzipped the bag and plunged my hand inside. I was shaking so badly I could barely feel the items. I pulled out mascara, lipsticks, and then tucked into a small inner pocket I felt something hard and cylindrical. I pulled it out. It was a dark amber glass vial, almost identical to the one in the video. The label was peeled off, but I could clearly see a tiny layer of fine white powder clinging to the bottom. I almost dropped it. This was the substance that was supposed to kill me. I quickly tucked the vial into the sleeve of my pajamas. I needed to get this to Dr. Vargas in the morning. But the powder only confirmed the how. It didn't answer the why. The why had to be deeper, messier, more human. I moved to her laptop, which was sitting on her desk, closed. She was usually meticulous about passwords. I tried her birthday. Denied. David's birthday. Denied. The name of her college. Denied. Then a sudden desperate thought. Our old wiener dog Buster, who passed away last year. I typed Buster and pressed enter. The screen flashed. Welcome, Riley. I was in. The immediate realization was that I was invading her privacy. A terrible moral dilemma. But the stakes here were life and death. I didn't hesitate. I scanned her recent activity. She was not studying pre-med. Her browser history was filled with searches for untraceable poisons, silent heart attack causes, and sickeningly, inheritance laws for cruise ship deaths. I quickly clicked over to her email. The most recent emails were from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line was chilling. Funds transfer confirmed. I clicked it open. It was an invoice from a third-party debt collector in the Cayman Islands. The amount, $450,000. The reason, unsecured personal debt. I stared at the numbers. Nearly $500,000. Where on earth did she accumulate that kind of debt? Scrolling further, I found a chain of emails between Riley and a man named Marcus Thorne. He wasn't a friend, he was a shark. These were not investment emails, they were threats. Riley was involved in some kind of highly speculative, maybe even illegal online trading scheme that had utterly imploded. The timeline matched up exactly with when she had started becoming aggressive about her inheritance money. One email from Thorne was dated just 2 days before we boarded the cruise. "Riley, this is your last chance. The grace period is over. You owe us $450,000 plus interest by the 10th of next month. If you cannot provide the capital, we will be forced to liquidate your assets, starting with the college tuition fund. You know we have access to your trust documents. Time is running out. Find the money." This was it. The main problem wasn't a misunderstanding or a sudden snap of madness. It was cold, brutal financial desperation. She hadn't seen a path to getting my life insurance and the rest of the inheritance fund except through my death. She needed the money now to pay off these dangerous people, and she was going to use my staged, natural death on a remote ship to do it, making it look like a tragic cardiac event from stress or age. The perfect crime in her mind. The secondary conflict immediately became clear. If the debt collector Marcus Thorne knew she was sailing and knew she was desperate, he might also be watching. Was Riley acting alone, or was she being coerced or even helped? Suddenly, I heard a slight shift in the air, a small, subtle sound I recognized. The sound of the dividing curtain being drawn back a fraction of an inch. My blood turned to ice. Riley wasn't asleep. I slammed the laptop screen down, praying the screen lock kicked in instantly. I scrambled back to my bed and threw myself under the covers, stiffening my limbs and shutting my eyes tight, forcing out those deep, fake breaths. I didn't dare check if she had seen me. The seconds stretched into an agonizing eternity. I lay there, utterly exposed, waiting for a movement, a shadow, a whisper. But there was nothing. No sound of footsteps, no inquiry, no sudden attack. Just the rhythmic sigh of the ocean outside and Riley's steady, faked breathing on the other side. He knew. She wasn't asleep. He was testing me. And I had just failed the test. I had gone from being the unsuspecting victim to the potential suspect who might now know too much. The game had just escalated terrifyingly. I reached up inside my sleeve, my fingers confirming the vial was still there. Felt like a small, cold assurance of my survival. I had to get to the doctor. But now, the risk of being seen leaving the cabin had multiplied tenfold. I was stuck. And Riley was waiting for me to make the next mistake. The emotional stakes had gone from shock to outright, paralyzing fear. The moment I realized Riley wasn't truly asleep, that she had been watching me from behind the curtain, waiting for a sign of my awareness, was the true turning point. Everything shifted from passive survival to active psychological warfare. I was no longer just the victim. I was now an unwilling player in a deadly game of cat and mouse, all within the confines of our luxury cruise cabin. When morning finally broke, filtering through the porthole, I woke up with a dry mouth and a leaden sense of dread. Riley was already up, acting the role of the cheerful, attentive daughter to perfection. "Morning, Mom. How did you sleep?" "You were out cold," she said, emphasizing the last two words with a slight, almost imperceptible smirk. It was a verbal jab, a test, confirming she knew I was pretending. I had to play it even cooler. "Like a log, honey. That tea of yours really works wonders. Though I feel a little foggy today, to be honest." I added the foggy detail to make her think the sedative was having its intended effect, masking my hypervigilance. "Oh, that's just the deep sleep settling in. You need it," she replied, pouring us coffee. I spent the next few hours walking on eggshells, pretending to be the slightly dazed older mother. I acted clumsy, slow, and overly grateful for her help. Every time she looked at me, I saw the cold calculation I'd witnessed in the surveillance footage, layered beneath her bright, falsely concerned gaze. My immediate priority was getting the vial to Dr. Vargas. I faked a sudden urgent need to see the onboard masseuse for a twinge in my shoulder. "I need to work out this knot, Riley. You should come with me," I suggested, hoping to gauge her level of paranoia. "Oh no, Mom, I'm going to check out the gift shop. I need to get a souvenir," she said quickly. The refusal was too swift, too convenient. She wanted me out of the room, unsupervised, but she didn't want to be with me lest I share too much with a stranger. I knew this was my chance. I hurried down to the spa level, the vial tucked securely into a sealed pocket inside my small tote bag. I didn't go to the spa. I walked directly to the medical bay. Dr. Vargas was expecting me. I slipped the vial across the desk to her. "This is it. The leftover powder I found in her travel kit. The same thing from the tea." The doctor looked at the vial, then at me. Olivia, this changes things. Having the physical evidence gives us leverage. What else did you find? I quickly recounted my terrifying investigation into Riley's laptop, the $500,000 debt, the collection agency, the Marcus Thorne emails, and the horrifying motive, her need to liquidate my life insurance to save herself from dangerous people. It's not just the money, doctor. It's the fear. She's not a hardened killer. She's a desperate kid caught up in something huge, I explained, though the word kid felt flimsy considering the vial in the doctor's hand. Dr. Vargas nodded gravely. Desperation makes people do terrible things. This confirms our suspicion of premeditation and financial gain. Now what do we do next? We are still 2 days from the next port of call. We can't simply arrest her now. The disturbance and the risk to you are too high. We need to catch her in the act of failing to complete the plan. And this is where I made my moral decision, the major plot shift. I realized that turning her over to the authorities immediately would destroy her life, even if it saved mine. She would spend decades in prison, and I would still be left wondering if I could have saved her from the debt collectors instead of the police. My mother's instinct, however flawed, kicked in. The revenge route had to be aimed at her debtors, not her. We don't arrest her yet, doctor. We turn the tables. We use her plan against her, I stated, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. She thinks I'm sedated and confused. She's waiting for the final, larger dose to finish the job, probably tonight or tomorrow. We let her think she succeeded. We stage my death. Dr. Vargas looked at me, shocked. Olivia, that is incredibly dangerous. We can protect you now. But can you protect me from Marcus Thorne once we're back on land and Riley is in prison? No. This debt is the core problem. If I vanish, if I'm dead, the life insurance pays out, the debt is cleared, and Riley is safe from the collectors. We then catch her trying to claim the policy, but we have the evidence to prove she was coerced, or at least that the motive was to escape a far greater threat. The real revenge is getting her out of that viper's nest and then dealing with the betrayal. It was a risky, desperate plan, steeped in complex moral ambiguity. I wanted justice, yes, but I also wanted to save my child from the terrible consequences of her choices. We spent the next hour meticulously planning the staged death for that very evening. Dr. Vargas would prepare a highly realistic sedative that would mimic the final fatal dose of the nightshade, inducing a state of deep unconscious sleep that would look exactly like cardiac arrest. The ship's security team would set up hidden cameras for the final confrontation. I would pretend to drink the tea, immediately fall unconscious, and they would move in to secure Riley once she made the move to confirm my death or call for help with her fabricated story. That night, everything was amplified. Riley returned to the cabin, wearing that same unnerving mask of manufactured concern. He had the tea ready to go. The air was thick with unspoken malice. Final night, Mom. Almost home, she said, her voice sounding unnaturally bright. I looked at the tea. It was darker tonight and the scent was stronger, more chemical. She had increased the dosage, knowing the cruise was ending and time was short. She was going for the kill. Oh, wonderful. My insomnia is really getting bad, I said, picking up the mug. This time I didn't pretend. I looked directly into Riley's eyes, seeing the flicker of predatory satisfaction there, and I swallowed the tea. It tasted overwhelmingly bitter, followed by a sudden, intense wave of dizzying heat. It wasn't the poison. It was the powerful, life-saving sedative from Dr. Vargas. Within 30 seconds the world began to spin. The edges of the cabin blurred. Riley's face swam into view, looking anxious, then relieved. Sleep now, Mom, I heard her whisper, and I watched as she reached out a hand not to comfort me but to check for a pulse on my wrist. Her fingers were cold. My vision tunneled. The last thing I heard before the world went completely black was the sudden muffled sound of a door opening discreetly and the scuff of shoes on the carpet, the ship's security detail moving in. I was falling into a deep chemical void, putting my life and my plan for revenge and redemption entirely in the hands of strangers. The turning point was complete. I was officially dead. When I woke up, the darkness was absolute, but the silence was the most profound thing. I felt heavy, utterly devoid of energy, like all my muscles had turned to lead. Then I heard a voice, quiet and professional. She's coming around. Give her 5 more minutes. I slowly blinked my eyes open. I was in the medical bay again, this time in a private recovery room. Dr. Vargas was standing over me, looking tired but triumphant. "Welcome back, Olivia. That was a rough sleep. We had to use a strong reversal agent," she said, offering a weak smile. "Riley," I croaked, my throat dry and aching. "Riley is in a secure holding room under guard. She's safe and she's being questioned, but she hasn't been charged yet. We managed to secure her phone and laptop right after she confirmed you were unresponsive. The footage from the cabin is undeniable. She attempted to stage a medical emergency." My heart ached, but the relief that I was alive was overwhelming. "What happened when I collapsed?" Dr. Vargas pulled up a chair. "It went exactly as planned. After you lost consciousness, Riley waited exactly 10 minutes. She looked satisfied. Then she tried to make a frantic call for help, playing the terrified daughter, but security intervened before she could complete the call. They told her you were being moved immediately to intensive care for a suspected cardiac event. We sealed the room, and she was escorted away under the pretense of her own emotional distress. She then showed me a clip from the security footage taken right after I collapsed. Riley was standing over my lifeless body. She wasn't weeping. She was checking her phone, texting someone, likely Marcus Thorne, confirming the success of the operation. That cold, calculating efficiency was the final, heartbreaking piece of the betrayal. The true twist, however, unfolded when the ship docked in the Cayman Islands, the very place Riley's debt collector Marcus Thorne was based. Dr. Vargas and the ship's security team had coordinated with local authorities, explaining the elaborate setup. Riley's phone had pinged several texts between her and Thorne, confirming he was planning to meet her immediately upon arrival to secure the documentation needed to access the life insurance payout. I was technically still listed as deceased to the outside world, my body discreetly transported off the ship to a secret, secure location, while the ship's log was manipulated to reflect a death by natural causes at sea. When Riley stepped off the ship, visibly distraught and supported by a ship's security guard, who was actually an undercover officer, she was immediately approached by a slick, imposing man, Marcus Thorne. The authorities were recording the interaction. Thorne immediately put his arm around her, whispering into her ear, "It's done, Riley. Did you secure the documentation? We need to file the claim immediately." Riley, still playing the role of the grieving daughter, quietly confirmed she had the paperwork for the policy. Thorne then led her directly to a waiting vehicle, clearly intending to whisk her away to file the claim. That's when the twist went from evidence gathering to full confrontation. As Thorne was opening the car door, 3 police vehicles boxed them in. Officers swarmed the vehicle and Thorne was immediately apprehended. He was caught red-handed, discussing the fraudulent claim and his clear coercion of Riley. The final, unexpected twist came from Riley herself. Once she realized Thorne was arrested, she didn't collapse or panic. She broke down, yes, but not in fear of her own arrest. "He made me do it, officer. He said if I didn't get the money, he would ruin my life, destroy my credit, and tell my mother everything I'd done. I just wanted him gone," she sobbed. Later in the interrogation room, the full truth came out. Riley was facing not just financial ruin, but actual threats of violence from Thorne's associates. The moral dilemma that had plagued me, was she a monster or a victim, was resolved. She was an idiot who made terrible choices, but she was primarily a victim of a sophisticated debt collection scam. She thought if I died, the insurance money would pay off Thorne and I would never have to know about her catastrophic mistakes. The ultimate irony was that she committed a near-fatal crime to protect me from disappointment, even though she was also driven by greed and self-preservation. I was brought to the police station after Thorne was fully processed and charged with fraud, coercion, and multiple felonies related to his scam. Riley was sitting there, head in her hands. When I walked in, she looked up and saw me very much alive. The look on her face was a mixture of absolute terror, confusion, and raw, searing relief. "Mom? You're alive," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I sat down opposite her. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply placed the small, dark amber vial of nightshade extract on the table between us. The doctor grabbed my hand and whispered, "Don't drink that tea tonight." Then she showed me footage of my own daughter. I said, quoting the doctor's warning, "Riley, I know about the debt. I know about Marcus Thorne. I know why you did this." The floodgates opened. She confessed everything. the failed trading, the mounting interest, Thorne's threats, and her desperate plan to use the inheritance. The resolution was complex, not neat. Riley faced charges, but because of the extreme coercion and the fact that Thorne was the main perpetrator, she received a drastically reduced sentence, including mandatory counseling and community service, rather than prison time. I testified on her behalf, presenting the detailed evidence of Thorne's predatory tactics. As for us, the relationship was irrevocably changed. The revenge wasn't about punishment. It was about saving her life from Thorne and giving her a second chance to face the consequences of her choices while alive. We used the remaining inheritance money, once the initial debt was carefully handled, to start her life over, but this time under strict guidance and accountability. It took years, but we slowly began to rebuild. The trust is still a fragile thing, sometimes thinner than the skin on warm milk, but it's there. Every time I make myself a cup of tea, I remember that terrifying night on the cruise ship, and the whisper that saved my life. Sometimes the deepest betrayals require the most elaborate, desperate acts of love to untangle. The cruise ship was supposed to be a vacation. It became the stage for a nearly fatal lesson about the cost of unconditional trust and the devastating consequences of financial desperation. I survived because of a keen-eyed doctor and my own terrifying decision to play dead. If you like this story of twisted family betrayal and high-stakes psychological warfare, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below letting me know what you would have done in my position.